So I'm going to call the meeting to order at the Finance Committee meeting comes to order at 6:33 on September 21, 2022. So we have a full agenda this evening. The first thing I will ask Steve, if we have anyone in the waiting room for public input.
Yeah, I'm watching the waiting room. I see no hands raised.
No hands raised. Okay. Well, wait a moment, just in case that if any hands do get raised, it's okay. Very good. Before we go to the agenda items.
Michelle Bailey just raised her hand.
Okay, Michelle, can you let her in?
Oh, she's in. I think she wants to speak.
Okay, that's fine.
So she is in the room if you want to address her, to allow her to speak.
Yes, Michelle, please join the meeting and make your comments, please.
Hi, Michelle Bailey, 2 Remington Road. I was calling whatever, I'm here to ask on the Article 2, that's the one that's related to the bonding of the study for the schools, is that correct?
That's correct, Michelle.
Okay, and so
Yep.
when you vote, are you voting on whether or not we should support doing a study and having that amount spent? Or are you voting on whether or not we should bond that?
The article, we're voting on the article as it's presented, Michelle, which is a debt exclusion. So that is the article we will be voting on this evening, one way or the other, but it's going to be a discussion amongst the FinCom. Yep.
Okay. And should you choose to not support bonding, would you then consider voting whether or not we should support that process?
Support that process if we don't support bonding, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
If
Or will you only be voting on whether or not you support that article?
That's exactly right. We can only vote on what the article presents at this point in time.
Okay.
That's what we'll be discussing. And we don't have the option of, that's a whole other procedural process for town meeting.
So we can't split it? We can't split it, Jim?
Split it meaning?
And in other words, support the feasibility study or not support the feasibility study, but reject funding or support funding. In other words, to me, it's 2 different things.
Well, it is, but I think we have to go with the article as it's presented, which is
Okay.
funding to move forward.
Okay.
Okay, we'll hold on that. Thank you very much, Michelle.
Jim,
Is there anyone else?
Jim, yes, Roger Smurge has his hand raised.
Okay, Roger, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Jim. Good evening, Roger Smerge, 7 Onion River Road. Commenting also in my role as town moderator to clarify, hopefully, the scope of Article 2 so that it helps the committee in its deliberations tonight. Based on my conversations with town council, Article 2 is not actually seeking the town's authorization for the funding mechanism for the feasibility study. Article 2 is simply asking the town whether to approve the school district's borrowing authorization. The town would then separately have to vote both at the ballot and at a subsequent town meeting on the funding mechanism, whether it was to be a debt exclusion or something else. I hope this clarifies what Article 2 actually is for the purposes of this special town meeting.
It didn't clarify it for me. It just confused me more. So we're not voting on the funding. We're simply voting on whether or not to approve the school district borrowing for the feasibility study. Is that correct?
Susan, what I would say is when the committee comes back to this question, this topic on the agenda tonight during your actual process, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, all right, thanks.
I just wanted to put that out as a public comment to set the stage for later this
Okay.
evening.
Okay,
Thank you, Roger, because I think that is worthy of a healthy discussion amongst FinCom, from all of us. I appreciate your joining us. So I was making that the first announcement was regarding Superintendent Tracy, which got us into this discussion, which we're going to have. The second announcement I want to make before we get into the iron rail is with regret. I received a resignation of Mr. David Reed from the Finance Committee today, effective immediately. He has submitted his letter of resignation as well to the town clerk, as required by Mass General Law. I want to thank David. I want to thank David for his contributions, his thoughtfulness, and his analytical skills as we developed the budget over the past year. It was very helpful to help us move the budget forward and raise questions that were answered, and we improved upon the budget process. So David, thank you very much. I appreciate it, and I suspect all of FinCom appreciate your contributions. Second to that, Steve, can we post the vacancy of this post haste?
Yeah, well, once we'll get the letter and we'll update the vacancies that we maintain in our office once we get a copy. I have actually not seen a copy of the letter yet.
Okay. It's in the clerk's, it should be in the clerk's office, Steve.
Okay.
So that's effective immediately. So David won't be joining us tonight and has ended his participation. The second piece to this is on the agenda tonight also is the Finance Committee reorganization. Now, Dave, as everyone knows, is vice chair. I am requesting that we do, once again, we defer that discussion to after, this is to the FinCom members, to after the special town meeting. Is that, we don't think we need to vote on it, but I'm suggesting that as a process that we take up and after the special town meeting. Is that just acceptable? Just a yay, or I'm not asking for a formal vote on that. So we won't try to address that tonight. Okay. Okay, thank you very much, FinCom. So let's and once again, once Superintendent Tracy joins us, we'll skip down to
He's here,
agenda
Jim.
item 7. Excuse me.
He's here, Jim.
Oh, he is.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, let's start with that then. If the superintendent's here, thank you, Eric.
Yes, good evening.
Hey, Eric. Thank you very much for taking the time. I know
course.
you had a pressed series of meetings. So, Eric, Superintendent Tracy is going to update us on where we are with the feasibility study, how it's going to work. Roger, by the way, I don't know if is going to join us after you present your piece, Roger Smerich, to clarify for us what we are reviewing in terms of Article 2 and how that vote will unfold. But I thought it'd be really helpful for you just to update us on the process today, where we are with this request from the two communities for the $1 million and our share of 346, and what the implications are going forward.
Sure. Thank you for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to fill in some of the blanks here. The process began back in March of 22 when we were invited into After several years of applying for the Cutler project, we were invited in March. It began officially on May 2nd. That was our kickoff date, if you will, with the state in what they call Module 1. There are 8 modules that kind of track the building process. We are in Module 1, and Module 1 is really designed to vet school districts to be sure they're ready. So school districts and communities have a few hoops to jump through in Module 1 over a 270-day period. So starting on May 2nd, we have 270 days to complete a number of tasks. About every 30 days or so, or we have a task that we have to submit to the state, and that's some things as simple as setting up our school building committee, which we've already done. So we've had to submit that for approval. Putting in certain numbers of students as they relate to classrooms. And as you know, we're planning to combine Winthrop and Cutler School into one building. So there are a number of comparatives that we have to submit. So how many 3rd graders at the Cutler School? How many 3rd graders in the Winthrop School? How many classrooms is that? So it's that we can outline kind of the bigger picture of how many kids we're trying to serve. And then like today, we had due today was the enrollments in each of our classrooms for the first 2 weeks of school. So it's basically an average of each day enrollment by grade. So we submitted that to the state. We've hit every deadline that was required of us since May 2nd. The next upcoming issue, as you know, is the special town meeting. And that special town meeting is designed to, is actually set up so that we can authorize funding for the next module, if you will. The next module is another invitation. So there's no guarantee that you get invited into the module, but they're actually looking at, did you hit all of the hoops along the way? And then the bigger piece of it is, what kind of community support do you have? And one of the gauges they use for that is support at town meetings for these first funding sources. These funding requests that we have coming up in the special town meeting total 1.25 million. And that is our best estimate, given this, what the state has given us, to begin the payment, to pay for the process of feasibility and schematic design. And that's really handing it over to the professionals, hiring a project manager, and then letting them start to begin the phases of feasibility. Where would the school possibly be located? What types of configurations for grades would we use? So all those discussions would occur in that next module. And then that would start to prepare us for the 3rd module, which becomes really that major funding stage of whatever the cost of a project would be. So we're just about through all of the hoops in the first 270-day window. We have the special town meeting left for the approvals. And then from there, we make sure everything that they need is submitted in January. They'll meet with their board of directors and determine which school districts get invited to that module 2 phase.
Thank you, Eric.
You're
Can I
welcome.
just clarify a number? You mentioned 1,250,000. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so in our article, we were talking about $1 million.
Yep.
And Wenham share at 346. Has that been changed in some way?
It has not. So if you look at there are 2 articles on the warrant. One is to reauthorize the use of $250,000.
Oh, the first Article 1.
Correct.
Thank
Article
you.
1, and that
Got it.
the 2 get combined for the total cost.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. I good.
Yeah, that money was approved in FY20,
In FY20, right?
but the state actually asked us to change the authorization language
Yes.
because there was no specific language used back in FY20. It was just included in the capital request.
Yep. Thanks for the clarification.
You're
I should have
welcome.
realized that 250 was the.
Sorry, I
Article
didn't
1,
mean to confuse
250. So Roger came on. Did you hear, were you on when Roger was clarifying the vote that we would be taking at town meeting?
I did catch
And
some of it.
what's-
I don't know that I caught all of it, but I did catch some of it.
Okay, okay. So our understanding thus far, and Roger is here still and will help us, is that we will not be voting on to fund this through a debt exclusion or use of American Rescue Plan dollars, but be voting on giving to the school committee the permission to borrow.
Correct.
Roger, do you want to,
Yeah.
so that's your
Yeah,
understanding
so-
as well? Eric?
So the reason why there's a difference, Jim, is because the borrowing entity here is the school district rather than the town.
Right.
So there is under chapter 71 of the general laws, section 16, a process where if it is a regional school district that's doing that borrowing, the regional school district has to go to the constituent towns and get approval at a town meeting. That's the current step. Then once the actual dollar amount has been approved and figured out what the town has to pay, the town then can decide what funding mechanisms it wants to use to pay that. And what is being proposed here ultimately is a debt exclusion, and Article 2's authorization is being made contingent upon it there being a debt exclusion. First with the ballot vote this November, and then at a subsequent town meeting, because the debt exclusion requires both processes. Let me read what town council has sent to me so that I'm being 100% clear and forthright. The article authorizes the regional school district to borrow the full amount of the project and makes that approval contingent upon the town's vote at an election to raise the money needed to repay the town's share of the principal and interest outside the levy limit. A majority vote is required. See General Law, Chapter 71, Section 16D. If this is approved and the town wants to borrow for this purpose in the future, a different town meeting will need to vote by 2/3 majority to authorize that borrowing by the town. If there is no election or the question fails at the election, then the contingency in the town meeting vote on this article would render the vote a nullity.
And a vote on what you just said for the permission to borrow, I'm going to use that brief, is a plurality, is a majority vote,
Simple
Gotcha.
majority. Yep.
simple majority. Okay.
If there were, then if this a motion on the article passes by simple majority at this special town meeting, and then the ballot vote is voted favorably, then at a subsequent town meeting, a debt exclusion article would have to be put forward by the select board
Got it.
or the FinCom and voted on with a 2/3 majority at that point in time.
Okay.
That's my
Right.
understanding.
Okay. May I ask a question of Mr. Tracy? So if we vote for this, and then we'll have to go to another town meeting, which I assume would be the April annual town meeting, does that fall within your time frame, your 207 days?
So it's 270 days. Or
Oh,
it's not.
okay.
So we have till January to get the approval
Okay,
to borrow the money. And then
Okay.
how the towns decide to pay it is a decision on the town. That doesn't impact the MSBA process.
okay, all right, good. All right,
But Susan, you just to clarify what you said, we would probably put this forward at the April town meeting.
right.
And that satisfies, Eric, the time frame that you're under. Is that correct?
That piece of it actually doesn't come into play because once we're authorized to take the debt, we would basically do what we did, go back to FY20, we did a ban for $958,000. And then that basically gets attached to the assessment over whatever period of time that the note is taken. So how the towns decide to pay it back doesn't impact the MSBA process. So
Okay.
the towns could choose to pay it out of, and I know this is a touchy situation, could choose to pay it out of ARPA funds straight up. They could choose to pay it over a period of time. It generally just gets built into the assessment from us.
Right, right. But by having that vote in April is okay.
Yeah, it wouldn't impact our process.
It
Once
would
we
not-
were
it doesn't-
approved by
okay.
the special town meeting and the vote, once we got
Yeah.
that approval, we would move forward with the borrowing of the money, which
Okay.
would satisfy the
And-
process.
And just for any listeners, both communities would have to vote in the affirmative to move this process forward,
Correct,
just like the budget process.
correct. Exactly the
Okay.
same.
Yeah,
I think
exactly
the,
the same.
I think the key distinction, Jim, if I may,
Yeah,
is that the two towns, if they both authorize it at this special town meeting, could vote to fund the borrowing in different manners. Wenham
Right.
could pay the funding in one way, Hamilton could do it in another.
right, right. As long as it's the $1 million that comes from the communities to fund the process. Yeah, got it. Okay.
I have a clarifying question. So
Scott?
the first sentence of the article does say to see if the town will approve the 1 million borrowing authorized by the Hamilton Wenham School District. But the title of the article is Prop 2.5 debt exclusion for additional funds needed for the feasibility study. And so how are we saying that this is not a vote on a debt exclusion specifically for funding when the title of the article specifically states that that's what it is?
Scott, the answer is because it's the content of the article rather than its title that governs. So it's the text of the article. I certainly agree that the article maybe could have been entitled better or more clearly. It is what it is at the time it went to print. But the text of the article is what governs the scope of the motion that can be made thereunder. And the text of the article is, as town council has explained to me, the authorization under the statute rather than the proposed funding mechanism itself.
Okay,
I may be able to clarify that a little more. The state required very specific language that they actually had to approve before we could move it forward to the town. So the majority of what you see in those warrant articles are very specifically match the state language that they expected to see in the articles, and then they went to council for approval.
And Scott, I will note that the article itself does say that the vote to be taken under Article 2 shall be subject to and contingent upon the affirmative vote of the town at the November election on a debt exclusion ballot question. But just because that ballot question is put forward to the town and even passes doesn't mean that the town is, as I understand it, locked in on that funding mechanism until a town meeting votes to have that be the funding mechanism.
Right.
Yeah, I understand all of that. And I know no one on this call was responsible for what we're looking at here. I just think that going into a town meeting on something that's very important with a title of an article that is mismatched to the text of the article, and the rationale being that we're going to need to state on the floor, or someone's going to need to say that you should disregard the title of this and please pay attention to the content because they are not aligned, is I imagine just going to create a lot of confusion among voters. I mean, we're confused here and we've been doing this for several weeks.
I agree, Scott, and lucky for you, that job falls to me, not you. at the end of the day.
I'm so sorry.
That's why that's why I'm here tonight. That's why I'll be at the warrant hearing, trying to get out ahead of this and make our town residents aware of what exactly this article does and what the processes after a vote on a motion on this article would be.
Is there
Roger,
any method where we could put out an addendum to this? That, I mean, it could be emailed, it could just be posted on the town website with a more of an explanation, like basically what you're telling us right now. Just-
Unfortunately, warrants for special town meetings, are governed by the statutes covering town meeting. A warrant for a special needs to be issued and posted for at least 14 days in advance. We are still technically within that, but to get that put together, let me talk to Steve and town council about that and see whether that's something that can be done.
Roger, what I was also kind of in addition to what Scott was saying, I was wondering if possibly having a summary handout at town meeting with language and a description that would help you and help everybody as you walk through this article. Would that be helpful or just more work? I mean,
So, well, and that would not be within my purview. I would, as the moderator, be responsible for reviewing anything that either the select board or this committee, or our town council for that matter, wanted to put together as a handout.
okay.
And I certainly, I am all for our residents and voters having as much information and clarity as they can before voting on something, but ultimately that would be up to either this committee or the select board to decide to take it upon themselves.
It's just a suggestion that would help the process, possibly, hopefully. Yeah.
Again, like I said, I agree 100% that the more information and clarity we can provide to our voters is A, good for the process, but also B, good for me as the moderator.
I'm sure, in this case, especially. Deidre,
Jim, I don't have the warrant book in front of me, but my recollection is that it says that this is a 2/3 vote. Is that accurate? Or is it a simple majority?
The warrant book was incorrect in that regard, Deirdre.
Okay. Okay.
And on the town meeting website and also on my Facebook post, the Wonderful World of Wenham, I attempted to clarify that this article, as well as a couple of the other articles, are mislabeled as requiring 2/3. To be 100% clear, all 4 articles at this special town meeting are simple majority votes that has been confirmed through town council.
Okay, excellent.
thank you.
Jim, I have a question for the superintendent also.
Yeah, sure.
Is that okay? Superintendent Tracy, is there, just looking at sort of the longer vision of this, is there the possibility in this process that we could borrow and pay for the feasibility study and actually not proceed to the building project? Or how does that play out?
So yes, there is a possibility that you don't get invited into the next stage. Usually, from what I've been told, that if you hit the marks, you generally get invited in. They get concerned when districts aren't able to hit the marks and or show the community support. And realistically, if you don't have the community support at town meetings, you shouldn't be going forward in the project anyway. So I think that's really the telltale sign of how we proceed. But I think one of the bigger things that we learned in a workshop with the state, the MSBA, was they're really looking at the communities and the support in the communities. And I think that's why we were invited in, because the town managers, the town administrators, there was some school committee, select board people involved in even the tours of the building when MSBA came, and they were impressed to see that many people. So it's really, they're looking at gauging how the communities are supporting this project.
Okay, so that's really key to this whole
Yep.
process.
Yep.
Every step, it seems, is key along the way to get us to actually a shovel, a proverbial shovel in the ground.
Right, and that's still 4+ years away.
Yeah, and that's a ways, and that exactly, and that's a ways away, right, right. Any other comments or questions from Finance Committee?
Susan, you're muted.
I'm muted.
Oops.
Yeah,
Okay,
Susan knows.
yeah, I have a question. Now, if this project is approved, then there's a significant reimbursement back to the towns. So if the project isn't approved and we go ahead and approve this and you borrow the money and we somehow pay it back, if it's not approved, then we don't get reimbursed. Is that correct?
So from what I understand, you can apply for reimbursement even on a monthly basis. Now, you don't have to, have to wait a certain period of time before you could. So I think even without that, you can apply for it. Now, whether or not they want to fund that is up to the state, and they have, you know, they're, as you may know, we're looking at roughly 47%. It's 46.6% or something like that reimbursement, which was actually unexpected. So, you know, the idea is if you're borrowing the money and you're moving forward in the process, then they would generally not say no to you, because they know that towns and cities have gone ahead and actually borrowed monies to move into this process. So I think the one good thing is we've hit every single milestone that they've asked us to hit.
Yeah.
And then, you know, the town meeting, the vote thereafter are really the last two. And then we'll meet with them to go through some of the logistical things in December and January. So I think once you're at that point, then you start to say, okay, we're going to actually borrow the money. Then we're actually going to hire a person to manage the project, an OPM. So I don't think we'd move forward until we were comfortable that the state was comfortable with what we were doing.
Okay.
I just want to clarify that there will be a ballot question on the November election. So it's not like we vote this through and then you vote the 2.5 override on the following town meeting, and then there's a ballot question. It's kind of reversed. So it's like a 3-step process. I think it's done this way to gauge, to make sure that the city or town is supportive. So you're approving, you know, the go ahead in that we're going to fund it through a debt exclusion, and then you vote again in November, and then it shows up again in the following time.
Okay. I mean, I think it's a real leap of faith to ask a community to, I just have to clarify, I really think this is an important project for everybody, whether you have kids in the school or you don't. But I think it's a real leap of faith to, in a sense, go into this somewhat blind. I mean, the fact is, we don't know if it will cost Wenham $10 million or $20 million. So it's a big chunk of faith, I think.
It's a big project, Susan. You're absolutely right. And you know, let me back up. So this evening, in the warrant book, FinCom has deferred a recommendation as we understood it, as to a funding mechanism, which is not the case that we'll be voting on this evening. So what I would like to propose is, if FinCom is ready, I'd like to propose that we make a motion to support the school committee and the Hamilton Wenham Regional School System with approval to borrow, Roger, you correct me, to move forward with the borrowing process for the feasibility study. Is that
Yes,
accurate, Roger?
that would be an accurate motion, I believe.
Okay. Catherine, do you have that motion?
I do. Should it clarify that the feasibility study is for the Cutler School?
For the Cutler School project, I think is the way to frame that. Is that right, Eric?
Yes, we've used the Cutler and Winthrop School project, yes.
Okay,
Jim, I think if you wanted to, you could just say as set forth in Article 2 of the special town meeting warrant book.
okay. So I'm making a motion that's a little bit different than what I anticipated in our discussion this evening. And we'll revisit that discussion after the ballot question is answered and supported. And at the town meeting that you're referencing, Roger, which will probably be our April town meeting, of the mechanism that we will take at that point to fund this. Where and how do we develop and arrive at the dollars to move this forward, right?
That's correct.
Okay, I know I'm repeating what's been said, but just so we're all clear on what the motion is this evening and how we're moving forward.
I think Steve put it very well, that this is the first of 3 steps in the overall process relating to the feasibility study. This is the statutory authorization by the town of the regional districts borrowing. Then you have the second step, which is the ballot question as to whether a debt exclusion could go forward. And then the third step would be the actual vote at a town meeting on the funding mechanism, be it that proposed debt exclusion or some alternative source.
Right. Thank you, Roger. So we've made a motion, and I would like to have a show of votes on this, if we could, to move forward on the motion that's I've presented and has been further clarified by Roger Smerridge, the town moderator. Is
Can
there any
someone
other
second the
discussion or
vote?
questions?
Jim, you
Excuse
need
me?
a second on the vote.
I do need it. Thank you, Deidre, on the motion. Second on the motion.
That was
I'll
Catherine, but I'll second.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you, Deidre. Okay, is there any further questions, Scott, Deidre? Any on this motion that we've made?
I'm just generally concerned because I've talked to, I don't know what a representative sample is, more than a few people this week, because this article actually has stirred up a lot, and everyone thinks we're voting on a debt exclusion.
Right.
And so I understand that we're not going to vote on that now because we have now had that clarified to us.
Mhm.
But we've had several meetings with the select board where I'm now not clear they understand what the article is because they weren't able to communicate this to us. And I think it's unfair for Roger to have to go to town meeting and explain to people who are really busy and are going to read most likely the title of the article, which is very clear, and the text, which says exactly what we're now proposing we're going to vote on, but isn't clear because it's legalese, and expect that that is a good outcome in a process where the goal is to show majority support to the state that we're going to approve this. It seems like we're setting ourselves up for a situation where people are going to vote against this because they're confused, and then that's going to be held against us because we're not showing enough support for the process. And I know that really doesn't necessarily have a bearing on my specific vote tonight, but based on what I'm hearing, it just seems like if this had been worded as if this process had been handled better by the select board, we could be in a position where I think you'd have support everywhere. And so that's just a comment. That's what I have to say.
Thank you, Scott. I think what I'm hearing and what I'm bringing away from this is that the reality is that Roger, Superintendent Tracy, possibly the select board, will have to do some quote backtracking, if you will, of explaining where we are and why we're at this point and what we're voting on. And hopefully, Scott, that will clarify at town meeting floor. I'm truly hopeful that by the time we have a full discussion of this, that people will be comfortable with what they're voting on and the process going forward, the three-step process, if you will. That does have to be clarified and worked on and fully explained. I am confident that can happen at the town meeting. I think whatever we can do to clarify it with writing or presentation will need to be done. So.
But Jim, a lot of people will go to the ballot box, but not to town meeting. And they're going to see this Proposition 2.5 debt exclusion, and they're not going to have all of the information that was given at town meeting.
That's a good point, Susan.
But
That's a
I
good
think
point.
that the difference here is that the ballot question would be after the town meeting on a typical debt exclusion, where this is kind of reversed.
But that's what I'm saying. But a lot of people go to the ballot box, but they don't go to town meeting. And you're gonna see Proposition 2.5 debt exclusion, and it gives the entirely wrong message. So I frankly think the town needs to get something out to each and every household, just like it did with the warrant book, and with an explanation of what's going on here. I think Scott's right. I hate to see people vote on things that they don't fully understand. And look at how long it's taken all of us, and we're fairly conversant in the jargon and everything else. And I think you need to explain it.
I think that's reasonable, and obviously with the select board's approval, I can certainly put that into motion.
Thank you.
It wouldn't be ever in everybody's hands prior to October 1st, just due to the constraints of the printer, but but certainly before the ballot vote, so folks can understand.
Does just to clarify, excuse, I'm getting feedback here. Does the ballot vote, I don't know what's wrong with my speaker. Does the ballot vote, we can't change the language in the ballot vote. Is that what I'm hearing, Roger?
That's correct. The ballot question is what it is. It's solely for a debt exclusion that has already been sent to the Secretary of the Commonwealth, as I understand it, for verification.
Oh,
Well, that's what we were, it's not like that was sent in error. That ballot vote was required by the MSBA. So we had to get the ballot vote approved by the MSBA, school council, our council, in coordination with Hamilton's council. So it's not like that the question is misleading on the ballot. That is what it needs to be.
Right.
But essentially if it passes the ballot as a yes, then the next step is town meeting, and then it won't go back to the ballot again. It's my understanding.
Right. So the town will have already, my understanding, town council, is that by doing it this way, where the debt exclusion ballot question comes before the town meeting, is it's basically a pre-authorization, and then town meeting decides whether to actually fund it through debt exclusion, either yes or no, or through some alternative source at the next town meeting when it's put on the warrant.
And that's what I was mean by it's reversed, Susan. Like typically you'd have the debt exclusion authorization at town meeting, then it would go on to a ballot vote. And a lot of times they die at the ballot, but they'll pass at
Right.
town meeting. But in this case, the ballot is going first. Is that
And
your
you can't-
understanding, Roger?
That is my understanding. My understanding is well, and I'm not 100% certain on this, but my understanding is that if it failed at the ballot on debt exclusion, the town could still move forward with an alternative funding source, having authorized the school committee borrowing. So if the town at the ballot vote said no to the debt exclusion, a warrant article could still propose funding it through something else, whether it was free cash if that was available and certified, whether it was ARPA, whether it was whatever other funding mechanisms are available to the town.
Well, I think, well, I don't have an answer to this because I think the confusion at the ballot with the ballot question is going to be something that'll have to be addressed. I'm not sure how, Roger.
Well,
I mean,
Because they're
it
gonna-
is an
I will
opportunity.
do my best at the warrant hearing, and I will do my best on the floor of town meeting, but I don't disagree that getting an informational flyer out to the residents, promptly, even if it can't be done before the special town meeting, it is a good idea. Again, as the moderator, I have no control over that.
Right.
But as a moderator who likes his voters to be informed and wants all voters who go to the ballot to be informed, regardless of how they're going to vote, the more information on this process, whether it's coming from the school committee, whether it's coming from the school district, whether it's coming from the towns, the better.
So I guess that's a question also is who has the ability to clarify this? Is this solely in the discretion of the select board? Can FinCom get out and say it? Should it come from school committee? Because I agree with Scott and Susan that this is extremely confusing. And I think FinCom has tried in good faith repeatedly to get these questions clarified. And unfortunately, that hasn't happened. And I do think there needs to be some reflection on this process and how we got ourselves here between FinCom and the select board. I said this at a previous meeting, but there's a failure to communicate and a failure to have a discussion. And now this is going to fall to the voters in a very confusing process where most of us are definitely in favor of supporting the schools, but it's very difficult to follow this. And it sounds like we are locked in with the language for the ballot, but yet we can possibly change the mechanism later. I mean, that's a very confusing message to try to get out to an entire town. So I guess whose lap is this in, to wrap all of that up, to try to create some clarity, as quickly as we possibly can?
I can coordinate with council to get something put together.
And Roger, would you be involved in that as well, just as the moderator?
I wouldn't be involved per se, but I would,
Well,
I would want to take a look at whatever was being prepared just to make sure that it, comports with my understanding of the, how this process interacts with the various town meetings that are happening, both in the next 2 weeks and then also potentially in the spring. But since it wouldn't be, well, let me say this, if it was something that was prepared and printed for this upcoming special town meeting, yes, it would have to go through me for that approval. I wouldn't be the author of it, but if the if the town administrator and town council work together on something to run off 250 copies at Staples before October 1st, then that does have to be sent to me just to check that box.
okay. So Steve, here we are. with a real need to clarify how this is going to unfold and what we're voting on. A special town meeting and then going forward. The simpler that we can make this document step by step with explanations, I think would be very helpful. So that's my only thoughts on this.
And I'll just say for the committee's benefit, you're not alone on this. I had a couple of phone calls and exchanged several emails with town council to get my head fully around this when I was given the draft of the warrant and the motion to go under it. So I can certainly appreciate the work that goes into understanding the process, understanding what this article is and what it entails in the bigger picture.
So getting back, thank you very much, Roger. So getting back to the motion that I made and all this discussion, does FinCom want to move forward with that motion of supporting the process at town meeting at this point as defined?
Yes.
Okay.
Can Catherine, or can you just read that one more time?
Sure. The motion is to support the school committee and the Hamilton Wenham Regional School District with approval to move forward with borrowing process for feasibility study for the Cutler Winthrop School as set forth in Article 2.
Okay, so that's, thank you, Catherine. So that's the motion that we're making, given that we had a deferred action, if you will, on any kind of recommendation. So this would be making a recommendation as such for the town meeting to move the process forward, allowing the school system, Hamilton Wenham Regional Schools, to move forward on borrowing money.
I guess I'm confused still on the difference between this motion and our language and what's in the warrant book, because is this the same as us voting
No, it's
on that article?
No,
Okay.
not in my view, at least, not in my view. Because the motion, the article really gets to, it really does get to how we're going to pay for this. And that's been the discussion and the difference of opinion, quite frankly, between us and the select board, which, and I would agree, I'm not sure whether the select board is fully informed of this process. They may be. Steve, are they?
I believe they are.
Okay.
But I guess what happens at town meeting for the FinCom recommendation on the article? Is our motion read sort of, it can't be a
No.
substitute, but do you know what I mean? I
Well,
don't see how they fit.
Yeah,
together.
yeah.
If I
Sorry,
could-
it was good. Yeah, go ahead, Roger.
Town moderator. Since the committee did not report a recommendation for printing in the warrant book, I will ask a member of the committee to relay the recommendation on the floor at town meeting based on how you vote tonight. And so that will, to the extent that the committee qualifies its recommendation or whatever it does, the committee will have the opportunity to make that clear to town meeting on the floor.
By reading this motion, for example, that this is what we voted on.
It will be up to the member of the committee that is advancing the committee's recommendation, how they see fit to speak that. I can't dictate it for you, Deirdre, or whomever will be the committee member advancing the recommendation.
I think, Deidre, one option would be, in fact, reading this motion that we've put together and the vote taken by the Finance Committee on this very specific motion, probably done after, Roger, I would believe, Roger, after you have done a review along with Superintendent Tracy of how this article is defined. We would then read
Yes.
make our recommendation after the process is outlined fully, questions, discussion, comments, and so on.
Not after questions and discussion. It would be before the it would be after Superintendent Tracy has made his presentation, and I've given whatever summary I and town council see fit.
Yep.
But because it is the recommendation of a board committee, it would go before the making of the motion and the opening of the floor for discussion.
Okay. Would it, then it gets, would our motion, if we read our motion, would that confuse the process?
I think if you said we made a motion during our meeting, that would confuse the process. I
Yeah.
think what I would say is that the committee should be prepared to read what its recommendation is.
Okay. So we have to pen that out. We need to author that as a committee, is what you're suggesting.
The committee needs to come to some conclusion as to how it's going to make its recommendation on the floor, yes. But
Okay.
I would, as the moderator, suggest framing that as a motion on its own definitely presents the possibility of confusing the floor.
I would think it would. I'm going to, you know what, I think I'm going to withdraw the motion that I made. And I think FinCom will have to author the recommendations that we're making, given the circumstances of this particular article. And by putting it, as I thought about it, putting it into a motion is just going to make one more layer of confusion for the town meeting floor.
Right.
So we'll go on from there. Is that acceptable to the Finance Committee? We will have to follow up. We'll have to follow up with another meeting shortly.
So
for the
we're
FinCom.
not going to vote on it tonight? Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, what I'm suggesting, Susan, is to have, we can vote on the concept and approve the vote on the concept and approve the borrowing process. But I don't want to make it a motion on town meeting floor that we read. I think that would be very confusing to the town meeting and to all of us. But if we can vote on supporting the process moving forward. Basically, that's what we're doing. To borrow for the school.
I mean, Jim, I think you could, on town meeting floor, when Roger calls, and just simply say the, Finance Committee supports the article as written, or does not support the article. I don't think you have to,
But
make
this
a
article,
motion or anything like that. It's
Yeah,
really
but
just looking-
Steve, at the
But
same
this
time,
art-
I think if the FinCom wants to make its recommendation in a different form, it's free to do so. So.
well, and getting back to the very start of this discussion, if we vote on the article as it's presented, then
Well, again, Jim, the article as presented only does two things. One, authorizes the school district's borrowing. And two, sends the issue to a ballot question for possible debt exclusion.
Yep.
It does
We'd be
not.
voting.
No, go ahead, Scott, if you have a question.
No, I was going to say we'd be voting against the title of the article versus the text of the article in a sense.
And if the member of the committee who was offering the recommendation on the floor wanted to say as much, they could say as much.
You know, it also says that it is starting a debt exclusion process. You know, in either case, a debt exclusion would be a two-step process. So you would, just because it passes town meeting doesn't mean it's going to fail or pass at the ballot. So it's like this is starting the process, and it's going to go to the ballot. And the yes at the ballot will, the only next stop is town meeting. It's not going to be another ballot.
Well, and that's why I said, Steve, that the article as drafted proposes doing two things. One is authorizing the school district borrowing, and two, making that contingent on sending it to a ballot question.
Okay, so then there wouldn't be a ballot on this question at the April town meeting, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and does it need? at
No,
this
sorry. You mean at the the annual town election?
Yeah,
Yes, that's correct. Again, so it's 3 steps. This one, the November ballot question, and then a town meeting vote if the town decides to move forward with it as a debt exclusion or in whatever other form, that needs to be approved at the next town meeting vote.
and with a ballot?
Not at the annual election. You will have already had the ballot question. That's why when Steve says that it's inverted from the normal debt exclusion process, that's why. Normally for a debt exclusion, you would have it at town meeting first and then go to a ballot vote. But here you're doing the ballot vote first, essentially.
And so there's only one ballot vote, 2 town meeting votes, is that correct?
Correct. The first town meeting vote is the authorization of the school district borrowing. And then the second town meeting vote would be the manner of municipal repayment.
I don't know how this got so confusing. That's what's troubling to me, but anyway.
So, and I think you
What's
said
the wish of,
before-
what's the wish of FinCom?
Sorry, Jim, can I just reiterate one thing to be,
Yeah, sure, of course, Deidre.
I think someone said this previously, but if it fails at the ballot, it can still go forward under a different funding mechanism, but not debt exclusion.
That's my understanding. I'm not 100% certain, Deirdre. You know, that's something that would have to be confirmed through town council.
I know you could, I think you could bring up a debt exclusion again as a funding source at the following town meeting.
But then
you would be starting a separate
right.
process.
So in that case, you would then have to go to the ballot again after that. Yeah.
Yep.
So there could be 2 ballot questions.
Right.
Theoretically, Jim, I think so. So if Article 2 passes and then ballot question this November fails, but then there is a debt exclusion article proposed on the annual town meeting warrant for 2023, and that passes by the 2/3 majority, then you still would need to go and get a ballot vote approving it. You can't, I mean, no matter what, you still need a ballot vote giving the yet on a debt exclusion.
Okay. Wishes of the Finance Committee this evening. Delay any, I suppose here are the options, delay any language about a recommendation this evening, and we get together and formulate. I think what we'd be voting to support is the authorization of the school committee to borrow money to fund the design phase of the project.
I think,
And
Jim, no, I think we can't delay things because I think people are going to look at it like we're tentative about the
Yeah.
project. And I think, I don't know. I mean, I haven't polled everybody on FinCom, but I don't want the general public to think that we are at all tentative about the project.
The project itself. Yeah.
Right. I mean, so I think that we need to do something to basically show our support.
Okay.
If people feel that way, I mean, I don't know,
Okay. So to make this simple, we could simply say that the Finance Committee supports the authorization for the school committee to borrow money to fund the design phase.
to fund the feasibility study.
The feasibility study of the design phase, right? Right.
I mean, I think
Is
if I'm
that-
understanding this correctly, Jim, we have to vote on what it says in the warrant as written. And so, and I appreciate Susan's comment that we need to be out there with a recommendation. So I guess my question is, if we vote tonight, can we then take some time next week to craft what we want to say in terms of qualifying our recommendation? But I think that we're voting on what our recommendation is on the warrant as written with the mismatched title. But essentially debt exclusion is what I think I'm getting.
Well, I was just trying to condense it, Deidre, just to try to condense the language for what we were going to support and what we were going to say to town meeting of what we were supporting. And looking at the language in the warrant article is quite complicated and long. So I was trying to move this down to something very readily understood for ourselves as well as for town meeting and where our support is of the project. And that's why I just
I agree.
try to summarize it.
I think we should take a vote. I agree with Theodore and Susan.
I think we
Okay.
need to move it along and just, say this is kind of a messed up article, basically. It's my opinion. I don't even know how it got this way. And do what we can to show our support if we want to show our support. I mean, I'm not speaking for everybody else.
I think that my own personal opinion is that this is a very important project. I believe that the support of this project supports the schools, supports the kids, the faculty, supports Hamilton, because we have to do this together, and sends a clear message to the state of Massachusetts, the Commonwealth, and MSBA. I think it's important. What's the high road here? I guess I keep asking myself, and the
Yeah.
high road is what's best for the community. And we're going to have to work the big we will have to do some work to clarify this at the warrant hearing and a town meeting floor. But I regardless of the funding mechanism, which will come later, that's another debate. That's a debate down the road of how we actually fund this. Right now, it's the first step. So I'm really feeling kind of that. I agree with you, Susan. I think it is important that we give the message at this point and we keep working at it. So we do have Catherine, can you read the motion that was made once again, please?
Which motion do you want?
Yeah.
The motion
Nobody really made a motion, so I don't have much except for a few notes. If you're actually voting.
Well, no, you read a motion that I made and Roger added to.
Jim, I know I'm not part of the committee, but just as a procedural person, you withdrew that motion.
You've already withdrawn it and it was agreed by the committee.
if I might make a proffer to the committee, and I don't mean to dictate how you want to do this, but you could simply make a motion to recommend favorable action on the article.
That's what I was gonna say. You're actually just making a recommendation.
That's all.
Yep.
Okay.
So your
Yeah.
motion would be to recommend favorable action to town meeting on Article 2.
Right, because
Okay,
that's what we actually have to vote on for town meeting. But
Right.
as I'm understanding it, we FinCom could still craft a statement, Jim, but
For
I think
town
it's
meeting,
different for town meeting, clarifying where we stand, but a different motion doesn't fit with the process. It can't go anywhere at town meeting.
Right.
And Jim, if I may, just to come back to Scott's initial question, at the end of the day, the motion that is made, the main motion that is made on Article 2 will not have the title of the article in it. And all that matters is the motion, not the article
Not
itself,
the
when it comes
article.
to what the town does. The article sets forth the corners of what town meeting can do. And then the motion is the actual action. So the motion will not have that title language that Scott, I think understandably, took issue with. So I just want to clarify that.
Okay. Who wants to make a motion to recommend favorable action on the article?
I'll make a motion to recommend favorable action on Article 2.
I second it.
Seconded. Any other discussion by myself, Deidre? Any other committee members? All those in favor? Roll call. Aye, Jim.
Hi, Scott.
Hi,
Aye.
Susan.
Deidre? Deidre, did you?
Deirdre, aye.
Deidre, aye, okay. Okay, Captain, thank you very much, FinCom. And we will craft a statement for town meeting floor as well. Is that my understanding, Deidre, and everyone else that will work on that?
Yeah.
I don't think we necessarily need to do that through a meeting, but maybe drafting some language and then disseminating it. Is that allowable?
I think we can only do that through the chair. Roger, is that correct?
Not 100% the resident OML expert, but I've got enough. It could either be done through the chair. The better process would be to do it through the town administrator to avoid the serial communication
Okay.
issue.
So we'll work
Which is
with,
always a rankle with, you know.
so we'll work with Steve on a statement that we can craft with this recommendation.
And Jim, if I could just ask, once you have that done and the committee has decided to finalize it, if you could just let me know who will be offering that at town meeting so that I can update my script accordingly.
Probably myself as chair.
I presume that, but I
Okay.
didn't want to lock
Don't
that.
want to presume anything. Okay.
in.
Thank you. Thank you, Roger, for
course.
your input. And thank FinCom. Thank you, FinCom, for your very thoughtful and good
And
recommendations.
thank you, Mr.
process.
Tracy.
Yeah, really.
Thanks,
you.
Eric. Are
Sorry
you
it got
still
so
there?
confusing.
You're still there. Thank you very much, Eric.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Roger.
Welcome.
Okay, so can we move on with the agenda?
Yeah.
Because we have some department heads, I understand, who are waiting in the wings to discuss the request for transfers. Is that right, Steve?
That is correct. I'm gonna pull up my
Okay,
participant view here. I see Michelle Maloney. I think that may be Rich. Is that you, Rich? Well, I guess we can move forward. If Rich isn't here, I can likely speak for him, or if we can go ahead with the public.
Is-
The emergency
Is any
response.
any of the other departments have, there's the chief DiNapoli?
Nope,
or,
I'm gonna present for them.
Okay. Why don't we start with the police salaries, the 4,500?
Yeah, so the police and fire, they go together. They go into different salary lines because they represent the stipend for the emergency response management plan, the team that we put together to help develop it. Essentially, Wenham has no emergency response team. It was recognized by Tom Younger as an extreme need. It was put into place. The ball started rolling. At that point, I picked it up. We built the team. Spent a lot of meetings going through who's going to be responsible for the various duties, the reporting structure, and ultimately fell on Chief DiNapoli, Jeff Baxter, Jason Lucatoni, and Stephen Kavanaugh as the members of the team. And with that, the select board voted to compensate them with some small stipends to account for the extra time and effort that would be involved. At least, initially, getting it off the ground, the stipends only run for about 18 months. So the rest of this year, and then the entirety of the following fiscal year, just due to the heavy lifting of starting from scratch, building the inventory, going through all the training, significant amounts of training that they all have to take, building the network of contacts and things of that nature. So that is the reason for the transfer. It's to transfer into the salary lines.
Okay, how many staff are involved between the police and the fire, Steve?
4.
And these stipends? Four for the police and 4 for fire? Or
Yep.
2 for police and 2 for, so there's eight staff?
Yep.
That are going to be receiving the stipends?
No, 4.
No,
4 in
4.
total.
2 and 2, right?
Two and two. The
2
4
and 2.
people I mentioned.
Okay,
So
Right.
it's the 2
Okay.
chiefs and the 2 deputies.
okay. Now, do these stipends become part of their base salary?
No, I don't believe I don't believe in this case the stipend is a pensionable in the base, nor would it
Okay.
be used for calculation of overtime.
Okay, or cost of living, it wouldn't be thrown into the cost of living calculation,
No,
so it's a separate stipend.
So,
Entirely,
yeah. So then maybe it shouldn't be in police salaries. Is there a stipend line item?
no, the stipends live in the line items of the departments that receive them.
Okay. And on one of them, there are just account numbers. I don't have a chart of accounts or anything, so I have no idea what that line is.
Yeah, you can be sure that it's a transfer to. I'm just looking at the police too, so it's basically. Hold on.
Police
I
salaries,
just want to make sure I'm
yes.
speaking accurately. I'm just looking at the account now. Yeah, police transfer. Yeah, so one of them's the account numbers and one of them's the name of the account, but the reserve fund transfer for the fire is that's the fire salary line, and transfer the police salary line.
And
So
there's
it's about
also no balance in the appropriation on either one.
I believe they will be paid out of their gross salary line item. I don't know exactly how the accounting works here, but in my past life, each individual had their own line item, or really each position had their own line item.
Okay,
We would budget for their total compensation, but that does not mean that just because it all comes out of the one line item, pensionable and not pensionable and overtime calculations are a separate function of the payroll software. So those are different earning types. It just because it's coming out of the same bucket of money doesn't mean that the earning types that are pulling from that bucket are not the same, and they're very different.
Okay, Deidre?
I just have a procedural question. Because the world that I came from, the financial management, typically we would verify the funding source and approval for the money before any increases in salary or stipends are approved. So I guess I'm curious, is this common procedure that the salary increases and salary stipends and so forth get approved sort of nominally first and then come for financial approval? Is that customary?
I think in a perfect world, you'd have the source figured out, but knowing that there's a balance in the reserve fund and the urgency to get this process going, the select board made the determination. But obviously, without if the reserve fund transfer is not approved, the plan would not go forward. So it's one goes hand in hand, regardless of the order.
Okay. And this
Are the
is,
staff, I'm sorry, Deidre, go ahead.
sorry, I just had one more, just a comment that these templates I think are a bit dated. So I would just request that rather than addressing FinCom as gentlemen, that we find another salutation.
Noted.
Good
Thank
point.
Are all the staff paid equal amounts? Steve? In other
No,
words,
all staff are not paid equally. Different.
for these stipends, I mean, I know they're not paid equally, but for the stipends, are they paid $2,250?
Yeah, no, I believe it's so that the hierarchy is the chief, the co-chiefs, director, co-director, and then two deputies. The director and co-director are paid $2,500 per year, and the two deputies are $2,000 per year.
I see. Okay.
And again, these aren't, this has an end limit on it. We're going to reassess the workload, but this is acknowledging that we're starting literally, from scratch. So
Yeah.
it's a pretty big undertaking in the amount of training and things of that nature.
Okay. Okay, are there any other comments or questions on the transfer from the reserve fund for the police? Should we, I'd like to take these one at a time to vote on them. Is that okay?
However you want to
So
do
let's
it.
take, yeah, let's take them one at a time. So do I hear a motion on the transfer of $4,500 into the police salaries to fund the emergency management stipends?
So moved.
So moved. Do I hear a
Second.
second by Scott? All those in favor of the request for transfer from the reserve fund for the police? Aye, Jim?
Hi, Scott.
Hi, Susan.
Hi, Deirdre.
Okay. That passes unanimously. Thank you. Same process for the reserve fund transfer of $4,500 from the reserve fund to pay the stipends for the emergency management operations for the fire department leadership. That's right.
So moved.
Fire chief and deputy chief.
I'll second.
Any other questions on the transfer for the fire department reserve fund? All those in favor? Aye, Jim?
Hi, Scott.
Hi, Susan.
Hi, Deirdre.
So let's move on to the next transfer. I don't have the light here. Budget to have a budget PT person. Can you talk to that, Steve, please?
To, talking for
To
the,
$3,625.
yeah, so that's a transfer into, hold on. Yeah, so that was it. This has a few things going on. So it was when the budget was, designed or arrived at last year, for whatever reason, the prior administrator wasn't aware that there was a built-in escalator in the software, or it was overlooked into, essentially for licensing and maintenance of the permitting software that we use in the building inspector's office. Additionally, it was not budgeted for that. The person, the part-time person, needed a cell phone to communicate with the guys on the field, and they were not. Also, there was not budgeted for any office supplies.
Is this shared? You mentioned the building inspector. Are these costs shared with Hamilton?
These costs are shared with Hamilton. Well, no. These costs are. This would be our portion of the software, I believe, but the
Just
other
the
stuff is in-house needs.
Steve,
So it's
Steve, I'm on the line.
Oh, Rich is here. He can talk much more intelligently
Okay.
than I can.
Hi, everybody. I met you guys back last budget season. We identified this issue back a year ago when we just wanted to buy some office supplies. And there was no money in the permitting budget at all, except for $12,600 for the permitting software. And that was last fiscal year. So that permitting software, we've found the contract after Jackie left. That permitting software, it's a 3-year contract that was signed last year, and it ratchets up $600 every year. So last year it was 12.6. This year it's 13.1 something, and then next year it goes to 13.8. So that really wasn't put into the budget. Nothing was put in the budget. We were actually in the red on the besides the salaries. So there was no money last year except for paying the 12.6 for the permitting software. And then this year, all that was budgeted, they carried through the number from last year. So all we have in there is 12.6. So we're already in the red, $600 for the permitting software, but we have no money to do anything. And if you've been up to the office, and you can come up and see, we've really got it organized. We got cabinets, we got a plan table, and we needed some shelves for down in the basement to get the plans organized. So we're trying to move in a positive direction. We just need some money. And again, we needed a phone. That's how the permitting coordinator stays in touch with the mechanical contractors and lines up their inspections. So that's what the sum of the transfer is for those items. So each town is responsible for their own office paperwork and permitting coordinator. And then the joint services is the inspector's pays, the inspector's salaries. That's what's shared.
Okay. All the overhead costs are borne by the communities, basically, is what you're saying.
Correct. Each office, the running of the permitting office in each town is borne under their budget.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
I hope that
There are no account titles associated with these numbers. So you have $625. I assume that's for the software.
correct.
Okay, and what's the 2,000 for?
Just sundries. Like I said, we got 2 shelf units for the
Okay.
basement to store, get the plans organized and coordinated.
Okay, and what about the $1,000? What's that for? The cell phone?
I believe that's for the cell phone and the cell service.
And that's how he communicates with the contractors every
That's how the
day,
permitting
kind of thing?
coordinator coordinates and deals with the mechanical inspectors, who are both, then I want to say part-time. They have other jobs, and so to coordinate them is a lot of work. So that's how it gets done with the cell phone.
Okay.
And is the cell phone left at work?
Yes, it's on the desk in the permitting office.
Okay,
Good question, Susan. Any other comments or questions on the transfer of $3,625 in the building inspection department? Okay, I'll make a motion that we approve the $3,625 in the building inspection department to pay for office supplies, telephone, upgrades of IT, and office upgrades.
So moved.
I second.
Been seconded. All those in favor of, any other questions or comments? All those in favor of the motion as made? Aye, Jim.
Hi, Scott.
Hi, Susan.
Hi, Deirdre.
Okay, motion passes. Thanks very much. Appreciate your input.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Thank you.
okay, reserve fund. Jamie put together a fairly extensive iron rail report. And reading through it, Steve, for FY22, it looks quite positive.
Yeah,
The end of the year. Go ahead. Why don't you just review it briefly
I mean,
with
yeah,
us,
I
okay?
mean, the high level is that, you know, all the rent was received and it's up to date for FY22. The select board voted in cooperation with the the Iron Rail Committee to sign the extension that was built into the contracts. So they all received a 2.5% escalator going into FY23, starting on 7/1, and everybody is paying on time and is up to date as of this
For
date.
23.
Yep.
So if I did the arithmetic correctly, our expense 183 of revenues in 22, expenses of 45,000 and change, and a net positive gain of $138,400 roughly on the operations.
I'd agree
But
with
I
that,
think,
yeah.
doesn't the 183 include the arrears that were paid in 21 for the previous year?
I didn't read it that way, Susan, but it could be.
I think it is. I'm getting 168,442, which is actually what's on the sheet. And the 183, that's people paying in bigger chunks and that kind of thing. So
Well,
I'm
the
getting
plant is not,
a net of 123,311 and not 140.
well, you got to include La Plante, which is below that. That's
I did.
7,100. And you added that to the
Mhm.
the total above for all of them is 176,464 for gymnastics, provost, band, wags, and soccer. And then I just added, maybe I did it wrong, but I added that with the La Plante and came up with the 183, which corresponds with the total of the 183 59598.
I don't know, Steve, can you help us out here?
I tend to, again, I kind of fell on my lap, but I tend to agree with I read it the way Jim is outlining it.
Okay,
You know, but at the end of the day, it's relatively close, and I think that the ultimate message is that we're back on track. You know,
Okay.
full receipts for FY22, 2.5% escalator, and all payments have been received on time, and we're up to date for 23.
okay,
That lost revenue amount, I believe, was like $97,000 or something like that.
right.
And we're carrying that and looking for the ARPA reimbursement. Use ARPA to reimburse the town for those lost revenues.
I'd like to see a detail of the 97,000 that was owed. And also my question is, if when the highway department plows or does whatever they do, is there time allocated to iron rail, or is it just under one lump? You don't have like job numbers, right? I mean, I'm
No, we
a
don't.
job number person, so.
Yeah, as far as I'm aware, we do not count like that. We're not, where it's town owned, you know, if the DPW is doing it, it's not like a situation where some communities have enterprise funds. So, you know, it would be an independent department that has to be fully, an enterprise fund has to fully support its operations.
Right,
In that you would bill off town resources used to support an enterprise.
right.
But it's different in this case, and I don't think you'd see many communities that would bill it off because the money's just fallen into the general fund.
But
So
there
it's
aren't
not really
also
really one big
many
pot.
communities that have rental properties, you know, so if we were going to capture all of those costs in a perfect world.
Yeah, and I mean, we could probably, you know, I think that would be part of, there's been a lot of talk around feasibility study around the iron rail, highest and best use appraisals, you
Yeah.
know, kind of updating. I know it was, you know, it was undertaken some years ago, and we're looking to, you know, I think you sent me over some information. Gary's dug some stuff up out of the basement, and we're trying to move forward with essentially a plan. Like, do we want to be landlords?
Right,
What's the best way? What's the best use of that property that benefits the town? I mean, I don't know. I don't have an answer, but I think what you'll see is we'll be doing some estimates as to how much time does the DPW spend over there plowing, cutting the grass. Like, I don't know all the things that they do over there, to be candid, but you know, that will certainly be part of the study. We need to see, you know, what's our real cost and what's our real time
okay,
we attribute
thank
to
you.
managing that
Deidre?
property.
Deidre,
Yes,
is that part of the master plan discussion, the iron rail? Has that come up yet in any of the master plan discussions, by the way?
I mean, it's definitely come up. I don't know at what point we get to that in detail, or if we do. It's certainly
Okay.
talked about as a property,
Yep, okay.
and what to do with it, but I don't know to the extent.
And
of
I believe in
detail
the
what that is.
master plan, it would be more of a higher level to identify uses, you know, that the community supports. And then the feasibility study would really dig into the weeds and come up
Yeah.
with the numbers and what the highest and best use is, or what fits into the master plan.
Right.
You know, looking at the
Right.
master plan, it's like, all right, you know, the town supports these uses. You could do this, you could do that type of thing.
Right. Deidre, you had a question, I think, earlier.
Yeah, I think it's more of a comment. It's the first time I'm reviewing iron rail information, so I couldn't quite understand the full picture without some kind of information about the prior year, and if there was lost revenue, which it sounds like there was, if it's being reimbursed from ARPA. But I think to get the whole picture, there needs to be just some indication, which I didn't get here, of what happened the prior year, and then because 2022 does look whole, which is great news, but are we still filling a hole? Which now, after listening to Susan, you know, I wasn't quite clear on what these totals mean in the left-hand column. It's not entirely clear, so I think some notes or labeling would be helpful. And then I guess the other question is, can this just be sent as a spreadsheet? Because I'm not sure it's efficient for us to try to add numbers to see what total is pulling from what columns and so forth. Whereas if you can just check a formula, it's a 2-second verification to follow the logic. Do you know what I mean? It's sometimes challenging to follow someone else's logic in a spreadsheet.
I agree.
Yeah, that'd be helpful. Thank you, Deidre.
So maybe that's just needs to go back to Jamie.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this presentation, I mean, I agree, we certainly can get out the spreadsheet, but the, reason why it wasn't a whole history of the iron rail in this case was that Susan in the last meeting requested an update on 22 and 23 specifically. I believe was the request, and a full accounting of revenues and expenditures, so that's what was assembled. But we
Yeah,
can
sure.
certainly give you some back information to that.
Yes, and that makes
Maybe,
sense.
yeah,
But if there was a deficit carried over or somewhere, the prior year, I think it would be helpful to be able to see where that sort of follow the logic and what happened.
right. And that's an interesting point, because if you look at WAGs, for example, and you go through their line by line for the full year, they have different amounts that they paid in. For example, in July, they made up, and how much they made up from the prior year, we don't know, but it was a fairly significant amount. And then later on, for example, they have a check, they paid 10,000 in January. So there's questions throughout that. They were trying to, I think, for example, in WAGs, trying to make up for the prior year. But I don't know how much, whether that covered it all or not. But there's
Right.
97,000 that was outstanding from 21 that we didn't collect. Is that right, Steve? Is that what you said?
That's going off memory, but I believe that was the number. I don't have the sheet in front of
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so that was part of it too, that essentially there's a variance in some of these line items, but it's not clear what the variance is attributed to.
Right. Okay, any other questions about the iron rail updates or report?
When do they meet?
Budget.
Steve,
Who?
when
The
do
iron
they
rail?
meet? Yeah,
I don't believe they have a set meeting scheduled, kind of as needed.
okay. So, I mean, because the last minutes that I can find, which were minimal, were from June. And I haven't seen any meetings scheduled. I'd be interested in attending a meeting.
Yeah, I don't think I was in attendance at the June meeting, and I don't believe they've met since. I know we've had a lot of dealings with Lou Rendazzo, but
Yeah,
nothing that required the committee to get together.
okay.
Okay, can we move on to the budget calendar that got disseminated about a week ago? How do you want to approach this? Do you have questions of the calendar? I know that there's one change on the, oh boy, it's hard to see. There's one change on the Friday, September. What's that say? 30th is now scheduled for 9/28, for example, all member quintuple board meeting with Hamilton Wenham schools. No, that's.
So
not-
that's on
not-
9/28?
That is all member quintuple board meeting with Hamilton. Well, wait a minute. Budget meeting, superintendent.
Yeah, so I mean, I will preface your conversation that the joint meetings with the school committee and both towns, they do the five chair meetings. These were coordinated with the schools and had a subsequently somewhat fell apart. So they are now sending out surveys, trying to reestablish
Sometime.
dates. So they're,
Right,
those dates are going to be somewhat floating. I think the time frame that they're in is likely because these meetings have to take place before certain benchmarks in the process. But I think that you can expect to see them either the times or the date change by a couple days. I think this
Yeah,
serves as a good template.
I have a meeting with chairs set for the 28th that Vinnie
Yeah.
Leon set out.
Right,
Okay.
and that was
That's
part of that survey that just came
Okay.
out.
Yes, exactly. Yep. Okay.
And this was all,
Just-
we agreed to these dates, right? They were all agreed to by all parties, but then the school, I think it was the school committee, started changing it.
So just on a practical matter, in terms of liaison with the schools, Mr. Reed, David was the liaison to the schools. So we'll have to kind of figure out that function on some kind of interim basis. So I will communicate that with the school folks, if that's okay with you, or Steve, you can, but it's going to be X number of weeks or so before we fill David's position, I'm assuming. So we will have to kind of see how that works out for the finance committee in terms of
Okay.
attendance. The other very concrete issue is it kind of reflects on the issues of that came up the other night at the select board meeting about Zoom meetings and live meetings and that whole discussion. I would like to have the FinCom meetings on Wednesday. You have them in here going forward, but I just want to make sure that the FinCom on a weekly basis, if necessary, not that we're going to meet every week, that we reserve the 6:30 slot.
5:30 or 6:30.
6:30.
Um,
That's when we meet. What do you have here?
I had 5:30 down, but the more the concern is, I believe that the planning board has the big meeting room on Wednesday nights.
Every Wednesday night?
I
Well,
think every other Wednesday.
let me back up.
Hey,
So,
this is Gary. Let me jump in quick. Planning board's Thursday.
Oh, Thursday. All right, so Wednesday is good.
okay,
Thanks, Gary.
but Finance Committee has not had a discussion about Zoom meetings, live meetings. That's a whole other discussion I think we have to undertake, and I'm not proposing we do it this evening, given the time, but that is, and we can't do hybrid meetings, right? If I understood the discussion last night.
That's correct.
Okay. But our meetings for FinCom should be at 6:30, given
Okay.
everyone's schedules, as opposed to 5:30. I think that's
All right, I
can be
can
a
update that.
challenge. It can be a challenge for some of our members. Is that fair to say, folks?
Mhm.
Or would folks prefer 5:30?
5:30, I couldn't do that.
I knew that was a difficult one for you, Scott. So why don't we keep it at 6:30 and we'll work from there. Any other thoughts or comments on the schedule as presented? It's a draft. Okay. So our next meeting, according to this, Joint Select Board FinCom Financial Overview Presentation by Finance Director and TA on Tuesday, November 25th.
Yep.
I'm having a
New
I
November
don't have
15th. November 15th.
November 15th. I'm having a hard time reading this with the light I'm in. I apologize. Okay. Anything else on the budget calendar? Okay. We do have the Warren hearing on the 27th, next Tuesday. Is that correct? At 6:30?
That is it Monday? Yeah, Tuesday. Yep.
Tuesday, the 27th? Yep.
Yep.
And that'll be a presentation of the warrant articles that are held by the select board. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. This is my first Warren hearing I've gone through here. I was under the assumption that it was led by the FinCom, but is that not the case?
Well,
I guess I'm just
So-
looking for feedback. I can put together
Yeah.
whatever.
well, I think the discussion on Article 1 is fairly straightforward. The Article 2 discussion, I think, is going to have to be a combination. We aren't on Article 2 now, as it presents, we are not voting on a specific amount of money. All we're doing is giving permission for the school department, if I summarize, if I can paraphrase here, to move forward. We could talk to it, but I thought all the articles were being held by the select board.
That's
Yeah,
correct.
they are. It is correct. So why don't we plan on, I will go through all the articles,
Yeah,
or go through them one by one, give an explanation, your role, Roger, whoever, and then I guess you can just have discussion. Does that sound reasonable, or?
yeah, have a discussion, and the finance committee can make their recommendation at the warrant hearing, as we would at the town on the town meeting floor.
Okay.
And
I think, go ahead, Roger. Yeah,
so Jim, you're correct. All 4 articles are being advanced by the select board. Steve, I think given that, it probably makes sense for the select board to, lead that discussion on any article that FinCom has made recommendation to, have FinCom weigh in
yeah,
to the extent that FinCom feels it's necessary. I'll be there to, handle traffic cop responsibility, as I like to sometimes, call my role. Yeah, that's typically the warrant hearing is each article is run, so to speak, by the body or person offering it. So,
right.
at the annual, yes, FinCom would typically take the lead on the budget article and, free cash and anything like that, because
Right.
those are FinCom articles. If we had when we have bylaw articles, or for example, this past year when we had the 3 to 5 question, those were select board articles. So at the warrant hearing, select board, took the lead on those.
Right.
Sounds
Okay.
good.
Let's see, we deferred reorganization. We did agenda item 7. Approval of meeting minutes. The minutes got sent out for 9/29, June 29, excuse me, and August 26. Are there any questions or comments or addendums to those articles? They're still in a draft form. I had reviewed them with Catherine and made some recommendations for changes, not many.
Jim, on the June 29th, reserve fund transfers, and this is just spelling the balance
Okay.
of the Reeve fund. So we skipped a couple of letters in there.
Okay. Very
You see where I mean?
Well, I am confessing I have poor light where I'm sitting. The
Okay.
balance of receive fund prior to the transfer, reserve fund, just a typo, it looks like to me.
Right.
Okay. Thank you for pointing that out. I do want to do an addendum to the June 29th meetings, if I may. Catherine T.
Yes, yeah, I'm here.
I'm gonna read this addendum to the June 29th minutes, and then I can submit it to you for the record.
Yeah, it has to be approved by the committee.
Yep.
Okay.
Should I just read it and then for approval?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. The Finance and Advisory Committee conducted its final meeting of the fiscal year 22 on June 29th, 2022, 2 days prior to the end of the fiscal year. As chair of the committee, I requested the participation of Ms. Deidre Parati, the new duly appointed and sworn-in member of the committee. Ms. Parati's participation in the meeting was not in compliance with Section 520 of the Town of Wenham bylaws, which directs Finance Committee appointments become effective as of July 1st of the new fiscal year. The Finance Committee Chair is in recognition of this procedural error and will be cognizant of and compliance with Section 520 going forward. The motions regarding 2 end-of-the-year finance agenda items continue to stand as 4 active committee members, a quorum, voted in the affirmative to support the motions. The chair regrets this error. Respectfully submitted for the record, James Purdy, Chair. I just wanted to clarify that 2 things. It had come to the attention from a few folks in the public. And it was my request to have Ms. Parati at the meeting. It wasn't any other part of that other than my mistake. So I'm adding that to the that addendum to those minutes. I guess do I hear a motion to accept the addendum as I read it?
Make that motion.
I'll second it.
Any other comments or questions on the addendum? All those in favor? Hi, Jim.
Hi, Scott.
Hi, Susan.
You're muted, Deidre.
I think my microphone is failing. Deirdre.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I just wanted that to be reflected in the record. I thought it was important.
Thank you.
So do I hear a motion to accept the minutes of June 29th, 2022 and August 26th, 2022?
I'll
So
make
moved.
the motion.
Motion made, seconded for the minutes.
Second.
Second, Deidre.
Yes.
Any other questions or comments on those 2 sets of minutes? All those in favor? Aye, Jim.
Hi, Scott.
Hi, Susan.
Deirdre.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Catherine T., for your good work on the minutes as usual. Appreciate it. The live meetings versus Zoom meetings, I want to defer to another meeting. I was asked to make an announcement on the community forums, the master plan community forums, Deidre. Thursday, October 6th, there's going to be 2 presentations, one at 6:30 and one at 7:30. Is that correct?
Yes.
At the Wenham
the
Museum.
Same presentation done twice.
Done twice. Okay. So that was asked that we put that on there.
I have a question about that. It's just not
Yes.
directly to it, but it said all ages. Do all ages include like my 2-year-old, or is that going to be really annoying if she was there?
As I understand it, the Wenham Museum will be open.
Oh, awesome.
There will be activities for kids. I didn't hear any age threshold, Scott, so I think.
But there'll be other stuff going on, basically. So,
Yes.
okay, cool.
Okay, I have no more new business unanticipated.
Can
think,
I ask a question? On the audit, where do we,
under new
where do we
business?
stand?
Sure.
On the audit? We were supposed to have a
That's-
meeting about it, and is it come back? Is there a management letter? What's going on?
Steve, do you have any information on that?
I'm sorry, I was muted. Yeah, as far as I'm aware, the audit was successful and no management letter, which I believe is typical for Wenham. There was one issued a year or 2 ago, but I do not believe I believe it's been reconciled, but I want to let Jamie speak to that. But that was-
I'd like to see the paperwork if I could.
Yep.
So just reflecting on that, this goes back now. Last spring, the plan was at that point when Tom Younger was with us and before the election of the new select board structure, we were going to hold a joint, and everyone was in agreement, a joint meeting between finance, all finance committee members and the select board, which did
Right.
not occur. I think it got caught up in a number of issues, changes in the TA, quite frankly. There was two
Yeah.
changes in the TA during that time. So I'd like to go back and just look and see what we have.
Yeah, I mean,
I meant
we
to-
are still early, and I don't think the CAFR has been issued or anything like that. So I mean, that meeting can still happen, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah. If you could go back and just review that, and I'm gonna go back and review the audit material that I have, just to refresh my memory,
Okay,
and we can revisit that, Susan.
Okay,
Hearing no other new business, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion.
Motion made,
Second,
second by Deidre. All those in favor to adjourn? Hi, Jim.
Bye, Scott.
aye, Susan.
I, Deirdre.
Thank you, and thank you to the Finance Committee. Thank you, Steve, and thank you, Roger. And again, a thank you to Mr. Superintendent Tracy as well for taking the time out tonight with his other meetings. We appreciate that.